Good morning, Hildur. How are you this morning? So good to see you.
Very good to see you, and I'm really glad to be here.
Oh, great, great. Well, as you know, I'm Keith Fiveson with the Work Mindfulness Project for the Center for Wellbeing. And today at Yen at 10, Your Environment Now, we have a real wonderful program that's really quite delightful. And we're both wearing blue, and how appropriate for the program we have today and our special speaker. Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yes, and first of all, it's very interesting. We're here on Earth with ocean covering 70% of Earth, and really should be calling this planet blue. Meanwhile, we're on Earth, so the focus has been on Earth, and it's even if only 30% is sort of coming out of the ocean, we have half the percentage of the ocean, so it's only 6%, I believe, of the ocean is protected. Meanwhile, we have 14% of land.
And you're talking
as
about,
in dedicated
water.
National parks. Yeah,
right. So you're talking about water. What flows
water,
through you flows
yes,
through me and the rest of the world, right?
Yes, and I'm a big fan of Sylvia Earle, who was is a famous oceanographer, and she dedicated hope spots, meaning there needs to be focus on water right now, because with less than 1% of water drinkable really on Earth, and there hasn't been enough awareness of the water element. And on that note, I'm very happy to introduce my new friend, Fredericka Foster, who has been working, I believe, for most of her career, most of her creative life with the element water. So I'd like for her to share with us her work in connecting humanity to the water element.
Good morning, Fredericka. How are you this morning?
I'm excellent this morning. Thank you very much. I wonder if there's some way that we can erase this nasty message.
Yeah, I just saw that. I will erase it on the chat. And I think we might do that while we're watching your lovely film. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm great with that. Thank you.
Great, great. So let me go to the film and we'll start that. And this is just a wonderful film which gives us some insight in terms of where we are. I'm going to start this film all over again if I can figure out how to. Let's go back here.
Once I have
There we go. All right, good.
life itself, often water is a symbol for life, or for the soul. Air was a symbol of spirit. Water was a symbol for the soul. We came from the sea, so we are told. Then in the womb, the amniotic fluid is like seawater. You're more than 85% water when you're young.
Oops, sorry.
And our eyes are 98% water. You know, basically that's what we are. And the whole thing of life, every single chemical thing that happens in conjunction with water. So the reason that you look the way you look and I look the way I look is because of the way the water molecules interacted with everything else in our bodies. At some level, I think we all know we're water. Painting, of course, we've been doing since the cave, right? And probably before we started painting in caves, people were painting with mud and water on walls. As soon as I started painting water, I felt like I'd come home, and the chance to interact with light at such an amazing level. I mean, the way that light interacts with water is so fascinating because you get all of these shapes that occur. And color, I mean, water has such an infinite amount of color, and colored grays are juicy. They're just wonderful. They're so gratifying. And basically that's what water is, it's colored grays. Suzuki, the great Zen teacher, said, if you want to watch your mind, watch water. At a certain point, the work becomes so meditative to me. Once I have the composition established, then it's a very emotional process. I just go somewhere else. It's wonderful. When I realized that the interests of water were being completely disregarded by the politicians, the corporations, just everybody. So many people today, they think about, does it sparkle? Is my bath warm enough? We take it for granted. It's such an integral part of every single bit of our lives that until you just step outside a little bit and go, wait a minute, everything I'm putting into myself is ending up in the water, and everything that's in the water is coming back into me. Oh, the principle that art could have an impact on people's awareness outside of an aesthetic limit. And I suspect that it can, simply because art changed my life. I would go to a museum and see a painting that would move me instantly, just stop the world around me and move me into that experience of being connected with something so much greater than myself. And I'm hoping that to whatever degree that I can do that with my paintings, people will never be able to see water the same again.
Well, what a wonderful introduction this morning, Fredericka, and thank you for the flow and the opportunity to really meet you this morning and to be in conversation with you this morning. You know, there are so many things that are going on in terms of the pollution in the world of not only water, but of people and their thoughts and their process. And we experience that every day. We certainly have experienced a little of that this morning. I'm wondering, you know, given your view of the film and given your opportunity to be with us this morning, if you'd like to set a little intention for us and a little bit of a meditation for us as we start the conversation.
Great. Water is a symbol for life.
Let me see, I think the film is still running. 1 second.
It was funny to see it one frame at a time. So Andrew Gladstone did that film for Tricycle Magazine. And that was quite a while ago. I just repainted that painting again. I finished that painting twice. I was so surprised to see it there. Anyway, we can start with the meditation then.
I think that would be lovely.
That would probably be a good idea.
Thank you so much.
After all this excitement. So, I guess the intention that I would like to set this morning is the intention of connection, and that we can all find some way to be of use to water. So if we all take a deep breath in And as you breathe out, notice how the thoughts that were filling your mind are able to travel out with the out breath, particularly if you make it a little longer. Take another breath, let everything go. Notice your body relaxing into your chair. Now, think about water. Your primary sense of knowing will pop water into your mind. Perhaps you'll see a favorite body of water, common as our eyes are made of water. Or you will recall the way water feels on your body, or the taste of water when you are thirsty, or the sound of water. Feel yourself connect with water, you, a water being, mostly water yourself. Now imagine the rain coming down from the sky, moving through the earth into an aquifer, being purified at every level along the way. Notice the saliva in your mouth, your blood pulsing. Imagine every cell in your body being purified and cleansed as the water you take in your food and drink moves through you. You, a most intimate part of the hydrological cycle. We are one with that rain, with all water, and connected, each of us, to one another by water. Take a moment to feel that connection. Breathe in, and as you breathe out, feel that the tiny particles of water leaving you have been cleansed. Feel the safety and peace that water offers. Take a moment to feel gratitude for the gift of life made possible by water. Thank you, fellow water filters.
Thank you. That's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I know we've got you here this morning, and we're so excited to talk about your environment now and the role that water plays in our environment. One of the things that I was struck by was the number of projects that you've done and the number of films that you've been involved with that specifically talk about water and our intimate connection to water as our bodies are, mostly water, and our environment certainly feeds us, whether or not it's through the plankton or whether or not it's through just our overall connection. I'm wondering, from your view today, is our environment in trouble given the water sources and what's happening globally?
Yes, unfortunately, we're in tremendous trouble, and people are becoming aware of it, I think. We have been using up our groundwater, even in America, where we have been relatively lucky because we've had such an abundance of clean water. We're losing it now, and the environment at every level is in trouble. And of course, the worst of this is that the poorest people on Earth live in the driest part of the Earth. So they're the ones who are going to be the most affected by this. We're having wars over water. A lot of what you read in the news that's happening, like between China and India right now, if you look at the water situation, that water that comes out of the Himalayas, now we understand the Chinese deep interest in Tibet. All of that water that comes out feeds China and India, and they're racing each other to build dams to capture that water. So that's just one example. Thank you for asking that question. I didn't cover that a lot in my talk, but that is definitely something that's happening. And of course, in the ocean with the plastic, we're losing, the coral reefs are dying. There is no end of bad news when it comes to water, I'm sorry to say.
And I know that you've done some wonderful work. You've done this flag project and building another project, building a house without walls. And have all of your projects centered around water? And where did you, how did you sort of develop this fascination with water and our environment?
Wow. You know what? Is it okay with you, Keith, if I give my talk? Because then I cover
Please.
some of that stuff in it
Please.
and what I've left out. Because otherwise I'm afraid I'll get nervous and report and repeat myself a lot.
Oh no, that would be most wonderful. If you've got some background and some information, I'm all ears, and I know everyone else is. So I'm gonna go on mute. That's often
Okay.
where I'm best suited.
And I'm going to share my screen now. And oh wait, wrong talk. Excuse me, I have to find the
What island is that?
oh, this is the island on Safari. Okay, and now, all right. Let me get this off the screen. These things always are just exactly where you don't want them. All right, well, we'll see what happens. All right. I wanted to thank you so much for having me here today because I love doing this. And I have found, uh-oh, this is not good. It's not changing. There we go. Okay, I have found that painting, which uses color and composition, can actually help to shift people's consciousness. Actually, all of art can do this, but it can also be an aid to societal change. Using tools of color, you evoke the emotions, and game makers have always known this. So art is a form of mental targeting, and the part of our mind that it targets is the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind, so that the emotions get involved. I'm a native of Seattle, Washington, so I grew up surrounded by water and in the water. This painting is of Lake Union, which is an urban lake filled with pollution. I discovered when I started painting these reflections about 20 years ago. Actually, I had started in the 70s doing a series using just water without a horizon. But then I left that for a long time, and I'll talk a little bit about it and how I got back to water. I found that in urban situations, the water is so dirty. And in glaciers, glacial water, you get this wonderful thickness to the water so that it becomes possible to get these very silky reflections. So in the late 90s, I was working with religious symbols from all different faiths. And this is my angel of the Annunciation. For those of you who have seen paintings of the Annunciation, they often have a dove coming into Mary's ear. So this was such an extraordinary idea to me that my angel of the Annunciation has the body of a bird. I had done anatomical drawings of birds and the feet of the angel. So when I worked on this series, eventually I discovered that every single faith used water as one of their symbols, every one of them. And once I entered into doing water, which of course is also a metaphor, I really found my subject matter. This painting is the reflection of the Taj Mahal in the pool that they have outside of the Taj. This is not the palette that was there. This palette belongs to Claude Monet, the wonderful painter of water. I steal palettes all the time. And the close tones make this painting absolutely glow. So here in the Pacific Northwest, we have, this is Elliott Bay, and this is where First Nation peoples rode their canoes. This is the forms that they saw. I want you to pay close attention to these ovoids, because here is a picture from Haida art, and you see these same ovoids. And this is the painting I did from that photograph. Now, this palette, speaking of the unconscious mind, I was listening to the radio while I did this piece, and the Iraq War was going on. This is camouflage. I couldn't believe it. When I finished this painting, I thought, where did these colors come from? Camouflage is where it came from. So this is in Norway. This is in a fjord. And once again, I have evidence that water has always communicated with artists. And you see these forms, well, they're also in Edvard Munch's paintings. He saw these forms every day, and here you have him. So as you can imagine, by the time I stopped doing spiritual symbols and started doing water, it was much easier for me to get a gallery in New York City. And this was an exhibition at the Fishback Gallery. I had 5 shows with them before they closed. The thing that I feel about water, when we look at water, when we sit next to water, when we look at a water painting, we enter a different state of consciousness than our normal, ordinary state of consciousness. And that state, I believe, can become one of profound connection. That has certainly happened to me standing in front of paintings by Claude Monet, for example. So I wanted to test, I was starting to feel that there was opportunities here, because art can be felt kinesthetically. These paintings are large enough that when you're standing in front of them, you can enter into the painting. This is Lake Geneva, and it's also a very radiant painting. When you see them in these small forms, it's so different than in person. Well, Lisa Schubert from the Cathedral St. John the Divine came to one of my exhibitions and said, why don't we do something at the cathedral about water? And I had been collecting files of other people who had been working on water in case one of them was doing what I was doing, then I would have to do something else. So I had a stack like this. I became the guest curator, and I was able to get, thanks to Kiki Smith, who I knew slightly, and Keith Haring had died of AIDS, and he had given the cathedral a beautiful altarpiece that had these golden tears. And Kiki had done these dewdrops, and I asked her if we could use them, and she said yes. And once she said yes, then I was able to get enough well-known artists involved in this exhibition that we had the funds to do a lot of programming. And we had insisted on diversity for this. It was easy for me to find a famous Black artist, which was Trenton Doyle Hancock. But this fellow, I found in a comic book show. I knew if I wanted to find artists who were not normally represented in galleries, I needed to look elsewhere. So I went to children's books shows. I went to comic book shows. And I found Mac McGill, who has since become fairly well known, who at this time, nobody had ever, he'd been in zines, but nobody had shown his work individually. And we framed 6 pieces from the New Orleans Katrina disaster. And they were very popular. But what really created societal change was the programming at the cathedral. So we had a Japanese Buto dancer, we had poems, poets, we had a lot of programming for 6 months. One of that was food and water watch. And when they came, there were 2,000 people who showed up for that talk. Fracking was just starting to make it onto People's Mattering map. We had put up an educational corner where people could look and understand what was going on with fracking. Politicians started to show up. I saw all these people on their telephones quickly calling, and we got more and more politicians coming because they couldn't believe how many people were pouring through the door.
Fredericka, this was the largest show ever at the cathedral, right? Over 40.
That's right.
The largest show ever. It's amazing.
Ever. And that cathedral is the largest Gothic cathedral in the world. I would stand against the walls of that cathedral and say, what do you want here? You know, it took 2 years to put the exhibition together. So I looked behind me. There were 40 card tables set up with these clean water groups who had come, and they were exchanging cards with each other. I started crying because the cathedral was willing to be an umbrella. And it's really important to bring in institutions as much as we can for these groups. We actually helped, I think. We were one of the steps to getting New York to eventually ban fracking. And of course, now the government is fighting that. Well, then I went and had an exhibition at Clarkston University. The Beacon Institute of Rivers and Estuaries was doing very important work on water pollution. So when they asked me to do an artist talk for over an hour, I couldn't imagine doing this. And to get people out, I invited local groups to come and play music, Mother Lode and Red. So not the most famous Mother Lode and Red, but it was fantastic. The whole community turned out for this. We filled the place up, and the newspapers gave us fabulous coverage. And once again, there was an opportunity to have this conversation about water. So after that, I got invited by Sage Bionetworks, which is a group of scientists who are trying to open things up and to have biochemistry and the other sciences work more like physicists do, where you have rewards earlier than that final day of publishing. And as a result, they can work together. So these are very radical people. To show you, they invited an artist to come and talk. I felt like the sorbet course in a very big dinner. And there were 250 scientists there. I presented my work and gave them all Think About Water bottles. I had done this design because I felt no matter what scientific field you're in, if you're thinking about water, it's going to be of benefit to all of us. So I did an activity with them. Randy Nichols is an artist who uses water from places all over the world to paint his little squares. So I thought, well, that's a very unintimidating way to get scientists painting. And I told them it was polluted water that they were using from Puget Sound because we'd had a horrible sewage spill. So it was easy for me to know what activity to do. We went to the site of the sewage spill, which was right next to a park. And in the park, one of the park buildings, we did this activity. And then the assembly guys stayed up all night making posters for the Water March for Science that was happening the next day. And this is what the scientists came up with. We are drinking dinosaur pee, which I loved. Whoops. So then I was asked to teach a class at the Seattle Artists League, and I decided I would teach art activism in the Salish Sea. And we decided to do a book which celebrated what we loved about the sea. I believe that love wins more converts than fear, and that by helping people to love water, to understand that they are water, we can make a difference. So while this class was going, J35, Telequa is her nickname, gave birth, the first live birth in 4 years. The baby lasted a half an hour. She carried this whale over 1,000 miles. She made international news. There was a funeral cortege of whales behind her, and it brought everybody aware of what was happening to the sea. And we had all this wonderful action and politicians and all of that. And I read yesterday that the Department of the Navy has requested permission for 51 takings, they call it, in the Salish Sea of the orca whales. A taking doesn't necessarily mean death. It means anything that harms the whales. And, you know, they want to do their sonar experiments and bombing experiments underwater, and they're applying for an exemption of the Endangered Species Act. There's only 73 whales left. Okay. So Gianna Pilar Gonzalez and I went to Columbus, Ohio, to the Columbus College of Art and Design to work with art professors doing an activity called Water Journeys. And the wonderful thing about this, we asked people to remember what they loved about water, and as they did and told their stories, they were so surprised at the memories that came up for them. We weren't, because we've been through this. In fact, I'm doing a water journey project of my own now, but it was a wonderful way to connect everybody in the room. And many of the professors said they were going to use this with their students. So another way to reach the unconscious mind is through music. And I'm fortunate to have as a good friend, Philip Glass, and I listen to his music frequently while I work. And Philip and I have done 2 articles together. As we were doing these conversations, I asked him how he kept doing new things, and he said, well, I changed something out. You know, I'll leave out a person, or I'll keep the idea, but I will make these different changes, and it brings new energy. Well, for me as a painter, I just thought, okay, I'll try new materials. So this, which I did for the article in Nautilus magazine on time, because a glacier, of course, incorporates so many different levels of time, was done on Yupo paper, which is a very slippery paper, which I never use anything like it. But I continue to mix it up and experiment. And then we've done an article on art, meditation, and dreams. And I had started mirroring some of my paintings. This is 200 miles from the North Pole. And we were with our Sami cousin, Marit, and we were on the boat that got us all the way up there. And the reflections in the water are so bizarre during this eternal sunlight that I understood why people believe in Nagas and in trolls. So these creatures in the water, I have been following the creatures around to keep my place in the paintings for years, and I thought nobody saw them. except me. And then occasionally people would come up and say, did you put a bird in there? Or, you know, was there a fish somewhere? And I realized I'm not the only one who sees them. This was during a flood, and nature, even at its worst, can be so extraordinarily beautiful. Of course, not all of the creatures are hard to see. I'm sure everybody can see a woman here. This is also a falls in Norway. And women come, and there's a platform right about there, and women come and dance on that platform. So with the mirroring, I realized I was kind of looking at Rorschach blocks. And so I'm also a photographer. And I took some of the water paintings that I had done from kayaks and canoes, et cetera, where I was very close to the water, and started mirroring some of these photographs. The creature that you're seeing right here, this water creature, I think is trying very hard to get our attention. And I really hope that it works. So, and that, anyway, so I'm going back now to when I first came to New York with my husband. And this was my first project with a scientist who is my husband, Ben Shapiro, a biochemist. And he was working on the protease inhibitor. And I saw his slides, and I saw this face, this hideous face in one of the slides, not looking like this, of course. And when I found out it was what assembled the HIV protease, and we had lost many friends by this time from AIDS. And I decided I would try to do something to transform the protease into something harmless. So here it's being transformed into a rose. I did a whole series of these paintings and had exhibitions on them. Well, the week this exhibit opened, it took 2 years to do it, was the same year that Merck came out with the protease inhibitor. And I was so thrilled. My husband was at Merck. People thought I was crazy for being so excited about a coincidence like this. But to me, as life has gone on, I've learned coincidence is sacred. And we need to pay attention to coincidence. So now, I'm sure you all recognize what's in the background there. I just did this painting of a rose devouring COVID-19. A lot of artists are working with this imagery now. We can't seem to get away from it, can we? So my current project, which I'm going to move somebody to the side, I guess, over here. No, I can't. This is thinkaboutwater.com, which is a website that I created for artists working with water.
I beg your pardon, but I don't think that we saw the screen share of the last image or the present image that you're referring to. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, thank you. Can you see it now?
I personally cannot see it.
We can see it here, John.
Okay,
thinkaboutwater.com, and we saw the last image, which was a rose devouring the virus.
Okay. So this is a list of artists who are now on thinkaboutwater.com, and they're all of us are working to figure out how we can be useful to water. So thank you so much, everyone, for your attention. And I hope we have time for questions.
Oh, this is beautiful. So beautiful, Fredericka. Thank you so much. And the work you're doing I wish we could get it out to everyone, because it's such a balm and such a calm as we deal with so many things that are going on, and your perspectives are so insightful. So thank you very much for your presentation. It's just delightful. I think there are some questions, and Hildur, perhaps you'd like to lead it off.
Yes, I have an undergrad in molecular biology, so I appreciate, I've always been fascinated by symmetry and the spiral and the sort of, there are structural themes, and at the heart of all biological processes is creativity.
Yes, absolutely.
And natural selection is driven by adaptation, adapting, and we must adapt to these new conditions. And I actually left a housekeeping note here on, because it really interests me to keep you safe here in cyberspace. So in terms of security, I've already thought of with the flow of water, we will redesign our approach here, and I will send an email. If you're not on the email list, I just want to make sure I catch everyone before people have to log off. If you're not on the email list, then send me your email if you'd like to receive notices. And I believe if we change the link weekly and keep a waiting room, then I think we should be safe. But that said, thank you so much. I really appreciate, especially when we think of water, I've been meditating on the fact that we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the ocean floor. We have only protected 6% of the water while it covers 70% of Earth. It seems we're so land specific because we're on land, like we're human centered, but our entire livelihood is dependent on water. And water wars are already being fought. So just bringing awareness, and also the diversity of your work. I have deep respect for how you bring in, how you went on a search for more voices to be heard. And I would just like to acknowledge that and include everyone here to participate with questions and thoughts and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you for being
John, I know you had a question, please.
Well, three things came into my mind, Fredericka, during your presentation. And one of them was when you mentioned spirituality and the presence of water as a symbol or an element in the visual expression. When I was filming in Kashmir a few years ago, Kashmir is a nuclear flashpoint, by the way. It's an area that's politically divided since 1949 into two countries. One is India, one is Pakistan. And I came to realize politically that the issue is not so much the territorial geography that's at stake, but it's the water that's coming through these major rivers into, not Bangladesh, because Bangladesh is on the eastern side, but directly into India and into Pakistan. Billions of people, lie in the balance there of this political debate. It's never discussed. Water has never been discussed in the conversation.
And of course, Bangladeshis are dying of floods.
Exactly. Okay. Now, the other experience I had, which was stunning for me personally, was that I was staying on a houseboat, Fredericka, in the middle of Dal Lake, a big lake. And every day I would, get in the boat and travel to the city to do interviews for my film. And I was noticing all the time the extraordinary patterns of fluctuation and radiance on the surface of the water. And at 5 o'clock in the morning or sunrise, all of a sudden there would be about 20 or so different temples or mosques that would begin simultaneously to do their chanting and prayers. They were all different prayers. And that whole, immersive experience of hearing these prayers and sensing the reflections and the patterns on the water was absolutely mesmerizing as an experience. And I realized perhaps in that culture, in the culture there of Sufism and so on, that the symbolism in their iconography are patterns. These patterns, which I felt resonated in the water and in the sounds of their chanting. So, coming back to our training in Buddhism, for example, or other disciplines, where we use mantra, the actual vibration of the mantra resonates in the molecular, construction of the moisture and water inside of us. And we know through the Japanese research, for example,
yeah.
the vibration, that can be imbued or impregnated in the molecular structure of the water by mind, by word, by speech. So our bodies are the vessels of transformation with our intention or without our intention. We are radiating those sensations that are, resonating through the moisture and, water in our bodies.
Right. So
as
John,
we're susceptible to the full moon, the pull of the moon. So,
John,
yeah.
you're talking about the research from Masaru Emoto, I believe.
That's right.
That change of the water in the vases, and just by pure thought. Do you have a sense of that, Fredericka?
Well, I do.
Yeah.
I actually think of him more as an artist than a scientist.
Yes.
And but I also believe that, and my husband has been doing a huge amount of work trying to understand where consciousness fits into the world. And as a scientist, where is consciousness? Is it in the mind, outside of the mind, in the brain, outside of the brain? So I think that Emoto was definitely onto something beyond question in dealing with the fact that consciousness is much more widely dispersed, I suspect, than we have realized. But those particular books, I think they're art projects. Anyway, I am very grateful to his work because I think it's beautiful.
Right.
So my question was, Fredericka, what can we do proactively, not only as individuals with our intentions and our daily actions? Okay, what can we do there? But also, how can we embody a more manifested community, from a culturally active perspective? How can we work together as a network? You must have some, advice, suggestions, guidance, ideas.
Oh, boy, John.
Just an easy question towards the end here, Fredericka.
And
well,
yes.
Just had a discussion about this on thinkaboutwater.com. The water artists got together and trying to figure out what to do. Some of us are going to be doing a postcard campaign because of the elections coming up. And we think that could be helpful on behalf of water, since the current administration is fighting the Clean Water Act, et cetera. But we could not get everybody together on that. Do we have our friends back? No.
No, we're
good. Anyway, I think it is happening, but I think these things, John, happen pretty spontaneously. I think we need to take advantage of every single opportunity that appears where we can get the word out. And right now, what's on top of my mind is, gee, if everybody could write a letter to the Secretary of the Navy on behalf of the orcas, I would really appreciate it. If everybody could make sure that all their friends vote, that they help unregistered voters who are unregistered vote. I think that's what's on my mind right now. And I do think community is happening, John. You're setting up communities. You guys set up a community. Look at all these communities that are occurring. And I think it will make a difference. I think we will hit some kind of change. I'm very positive. When you realize that gay marriage was impossible, right? Impossible. And now it happens. The culture changed really fast around that. Of course, we're getting kickback every time that we elected a Black president. We're getting kickback, but still most Americans believe now that Black Lives Matter and are supporting that group. That couldn't have happened before. And this catastrophe emptied our streets so that people could get out and march. You know, even the COVID-19, which has had positive things about it, as you said, Keith, planes not flying, less cars, less of everything. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better because of what's going to happen to the economy. I hope I'm wrong.
And what's so wonderful with that, Fredericka, to your point, and I know Steve has one question which we want to ask before we come to a close, but what's so wonderful about that is as long as we're in conversation, and here we are around the country, around the world on a Zoom call, and yeah, there are disruptors and there are folks, but the conversation is such that we can see what happens emotionally. We can see what happens, in our consciousness when there is dissension, when there is collaboration. And isn't it wonderful that we have this opportunity to come together and be in conversation? Isn't that wonderful? As long as we have conversation, we have community. So Steve, you have a question, please. Let me take you off mute here. And you should be unmuted, or I think you muted yourself while I unmuted you. Let's see. There you go. Okay, Steve, please.
Hi.
Actually, two questions. One real quick, one-word answer. I missed the Rumi quote that you said, if you want to watch life,
you're coming in a little garbled.
In the film. Can you guys hear me or no?
No, now I think you asked a question about what the Rumi quote was.
Suzuki. It actually was Suzuki. He said, if you wish to understand yourself, simply watch water. And in watching water, you can see the flow of the mind, I think is what he meant. That was by Suzuki. And your second question? Oh, we can't hear you, Steve.
I know. Go ahead, Steve. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me now? A just question about process. When you paint water, are you doing it from photographs? Are you doing it while the water is obviously moving in front of you? Is it a combination of the two? Because you kind of freeze it in time. I'm just curious about the process.
Thank you. That's a great question. I did hear you. It's a wonderful question because I start with photographs that I make of water. I make thousands of photographs of water. But I paint in a very traditional way using layers of glazes, which is why the light can shine through. That takes long time to make. So I start the work in the field with my camera, and I do work from photographs. But as you saw from the photographic example that I showed you, as I'm being very true to the photograph, I feel, but when I'm done, it looks quite different 90% of the time. So something else happens when you're painting. The painting at some point has its own voice. It starts to talk back to you. You get in this wonderful dance. So for me, painting is really a meditative process that takes me to another place where I love being. And I think that natural state that being by water helps us experience is one of profound respect for life, for our place in life. You know, we can feel that sense of connection when we're with water, and that's what I think will save us. I think that at some point people are going to realize, wait a minute, the Earth will survive, but we won't. And, you know, with global warming, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. Paul, somebody said, if global warming is a shark, water is its teeth.
Well, that's well. Thank you so much, Fredericka, for your inspiring us. And I know if people want to get a hold of you and see more of your work and the things that you're doing, you do have a website, and I think we've put it up on the chat box here at frederickafoster.com, so people can join you there. And I also know, Hildur, if people want to get a hold of you and provide more information, maybe emails of other folks that might want to join this weekly Your Environment Now at 10 or Yen at 10, they can do that. And how can they do that, Hildur?
Please email me at hildur@rewildlongisland.org or hildur@sol.center, no com.
Perfect.
Fredericka, I'm just so glad you were our host today.
Oh, thank you so much for asking me. I really, and it was such a thrill for me to see all of you here. It was wonderful.
Yes, and you know, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I think it's important to bring this into our consciousness to understand what water means to us at such a vital level in terms of our consciousness.
Yes, and it's not too late. The acidification of the oceans, where half of the coral reefs are gone. With the whales, I really recommend the documentary Watson. Have you seen that one?
No.
That's actually, as a young kid in Iceland, sea shepherd came to the shores. Greenpeace backed off and because of the whaling industry. So I think I became an activist then. I saw them, you know, they would handcuff themselves to the harpoons and half hanging in the Arctic Sea. So Watson is the founder of Sea Shepherd, and he actually had the courage. He had no fear of dying, and he would stand with his body on ice, literally on thin ice in the Arctic Sea, holding the boat. It's very striking. He used art in that way to stop the whale killings. And there's an understanding now in the scientific community that we need the whales to defecate near the surface to feed the plankton, the phytoplankton feeding the zooplankton that then nurtures this cycle of life. And most of our oxygen is not in the Amazon. It's actually coming from the ocean organisms. And I believe there's like a disconnect. We need to really be teaching this at every level in our schools. And perhaps that if we grew, here's the hope message. If we grew kelp forests, there's algae, more algae, the good kind that's creating oxygen, we could actually reverse and work with the CO2 that's saturating the ocean.
And Fredericka, I hope you'll join us again as we do Yen at 10. We're gonna go into overtime here, so we're gonna close up the show for the moment. And those who want to, please join us in our overtime conversation. My name is Keith Fiveson, again at the Work Mindfulness Project. That's workmindfulnessproject.com or workmindfulness.com. And I'm here for the Center for Wellbeing. And I thank you again, Fredericka, Hildur, John, all of our guests today for being with us and taking your time to help make your environment now much better than it is. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.